We'd like to hear your comments on the following broadcast and invite you to call the WGBH response line at 876-WGBH during the program.
We have main engine start.
Tonight on the 10 o'clock news, the shuttle liftoff that moments later sent a nation into mourning.
Liftoff.
President Reagan urges the nation's school children not to take the wrong lesson from the tragedy.
It's all part of the process of exploration and discovery. It's all part of taking a chance and expanding man's horizons.
The 10 o'clock news is made possible by your contribution and by grants from New England Telephone, serving New England's communications needs for 100 years. By Nimrod Press, printers and engravers. By Shawmut Banks, providers of education, financing, and information at over 170 offices throughout Massachusetts.
Good evening, I'm Christopher Lydon. On the explosion of the Teachers satellite mission that killed 7 American pioneers and wounded each of us in a way, our guests tonight are the space journalist Victor Mcllhenny of MIT, Joshua Meyrowitz, the Global Village anthropologist, and Dorothy Austin, psychotherapist.
I'm Gail Harris. It was a day that began with a moment of exhilaration as the first space shuttle carrying a civilian school teacher lifted off from Cape Canaveral, followed quickly by horror as the shuttle disintegrated into an enormous ball of flame. By late this afternoon, NASA officials confirmed what all who watched knew immediately, that no one could have survived the explosion, and no one did. On board were New Hampshire school teacher Christa McAuliffe, Commander Francis Scobee, co-pilot Michael Smith, and astronauts Ronald McNair, Judith Resnik, Ellison Onizuka, and Gregory Jarvis. The launch had been delayed yet again this morning so that crews could clear away icicles that had formed on the shuttle. Then, at 11:38, NASA reported liftoff.
Engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
Now control. Roger, roll, Challenger. Good, roll program confirmed. Challenger now heading downrange. Engines beginning throttling down now at 94%. Normal throttles for most of the flight, 104%. We'll throttle down to 65% shortly. Engines at 65%, 3 engines running normally, 3 good fuel cells, 3 good APUs. Velocity 2,257 feet per second. Altitude 4.3 nautical miles, downrange distance 3 nautical miles. Engines throttling up, 3 engines now at 104%.
Challenger, go at throttle up.
Challenger, go at throttle up. 1 minute 15 seconds. Velocity 2,900 feet per second. Altitude 9 nautical miles. Downrange distance 7 nautical miles.
Rescue squads were immediately sent to the area about 18 miles off the Florida coast, but nothing other than small bits of debris remained of what had been a $1.2 billion shuttle workhorse, the Challenger, or the 7 crew members on board.
The fact that the booster rockets flew on in their own twisted paths after the explosion seemed to hint that the problem was perhaps in the main fuel tank. Videotapes in slow motion seemed to reveal flares from what could have been fuel leaks. But all that was unconfirmed guesswork. The accident, after what looked like a perfect launch, defied explanation today. NASA's chief of the shuttle program, Jesse Moore, said there would be no speculating from that far-off photography about the cause of this disaster, though he thought a careful review of all the evidence would turn up answers. Moore was asked if any precautions had been neglected today in impatience or under outside pressure.
There was absolutely no pressure to get this particular launch off. We have always maintained that flight safety is our top priority consideration in the program, and we look at the status and readiness of the systems based on that. We thoroughly reviewed the activities over the weekend and yesterday, and continually reviewed the status of Challenger right up until launch this morning. All of the people involved in this program, to my knowledge, felt that Challenger was quite ready to go. And I made the decision, along with the recommendation from the team supporting me, that we launch.
Our guest, Victor Mcllhenny, covered space launches without number as a science reporter for the Boston Globe and the New York Times. He is the director of the Vannevar Bush Fellowship Program in Science Journalism at MIT. The line from the government clearly is that this human tragedy is not going to deflect the space program at all. Can that really be?
Well, the scientists themselves are very worried about the implications of this. They're shaken by like the rest of us, by the tragedy of what's happened. They're also trying to figure out what this could do to them and do the work that they want to do, whether they're interested in a defense problem related to Star Wars or whether they're interested in planetary exploration. They're looking at the possibility of 6 months to a year of no shuttle flights at all, and having to find alternate rockets to put the experiments into space on, or simply having to slip the launch for a year or more, and they're all in a state of rather dreadful uncertainty today.
One supposes it would revive all manner of arguments about not just manned space flight, but all the way through Star Wars. It's going to juice up all of those questions in an atmosphere of huge political anxiety.
Yes.
Tick off the consequences as nearly as you can guess them, starting with the future of the manned space program.
Well, there's so many things that people are hoping for. They'd like to do a space station. They'd like to get ready to go to Mars. There are all these things that people think about over 20 or 30 years. All of those depend upon having a reliable shuttle that doesn't do something like today. So those become slightly more in jeopardy as the scientists look at specific planetary missions, like one that is supposed to go to Jupiter, that was going to go off in May, which now it seems clearly off until another window opens up in June of '87. A rather spectacular mission involving European cooperation of sending a spacecraft right over the North Pole of the Sun. That's also apparently off for a long time. We have a big space telescope going into orbit in October, already delayed for other reasons that might be off sort of indefinitely. People are even worrying about a fascinating mission to Venus in 1988. All these, the train has just lost its engine, and now all the cars behind it are going bump, 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 and the caboose is thrown off the track.
Would you say there are scientific and political critics ready to pounce on this event as a reason to change course?
I'm sure there are. One does have to mention, though, and perhaps we'll get into, other guests will get into this later, but there's tremendous emotional pressure not to have these lives spent in vain, not to be deflected from the course of human exploration of the unknown. There's a lot of emotional commitment to this that may actually have been crystallized and made warmer by today's events. So that any scientific criticism about putting all of our eggs in one basket, and military criticism too. The military is very worried about doing everything with the shuttle. They're quietly getting ready to buy some more expendable rockets to put their experiments up if the shuttle is lost to them for a while. They've been worried about this for a long time. Those somewhat more pragmatic arguments are going to be going against an emotional background of commitment to the mystery of exploration that may actually have been strengthened today.
In President Reagan's remarkable speech, but also in a lot of the network coverage today, it seemed to me was an almost palpable eagerness to avoid the question of Star Wars and the implications of,
yes,
of technological and human fallibility at this sort of threshold. How is that argument going to develop?
Well, I think we all, when the bridge falls down and, or the plane crashes, there's always the argument that we ought to abandon that way of doing it. If a bridge in Montreal crashes, we then rebuild it 10 years later at twice the weight. The DC-10s are still flying. People tend to get back on the track. There's an agony for a while. You ground the airplane or something like that, but then people sort of wake up to the fact that it's useful and they want to go on with it. The space program is quite an emotional thing, and people are rather committed to something that is hard for them to define. Some of the tears that we're seeing today have some special emotions behind them that we don't know all about.
From the beginning, in short, it has never been pure science, and maybe
That's
it
right.
should never have been. Doesn't need to be.
That's right.
Thank you, Victor Mcllhenny.
School teacher Christa McAuliffe was the first civilian in space, picked from more than 11,000 other teachers who applied. She had planned to conduct 2 education lessons from on board the space shuttle. It was a mission that she said left her excited instead of apprehensive.
As far as being apprehensive or scared, right now the major emotion is excitement, and I think that's going to continue right through the launch. The crew is excited. When we get together for a simulation, it's fun to watch them work, and I'm sure when we're down at the Cape and we go through kind of a dress rehearsal down the Cape the beginning of January, and we get all suited up and we go into the orbiter and they do the actual countdown, but we just don't blast off, and I'm looking forward to that. But I'm sure when those engines do blast off, the adrenaline's going to be flowing, but it's going to be basically from excitement.
This was the first of several planned civilian in space missions. That program may now be jeopardized. And when the teacher in space idea was first proposed, there were many skeptics too. But within the teaching profession, as Christy George discovered today, there still remains enthusiasm for the program.
At Framingham State College, where Christa McAuliffe got her teaching degree, there were tears today during the endless instant replays from people who shared her profession and saw her mission as helping theirs.
Challenger, go and throttle up.
The last word. Something terrible has gone wrong. Others realize.
Christa McAuliffe was chosen as a teacher in space to remind people of the importance of educators, and she meant to pass on what she learned when she came back.
Oh, that's great! I love it! I've seen people at Johnson Space Center work in a group using critical thinking, using problem solving, all the things that we do in the classroom. And it's fun for a teacher sometimes to step out of the role as a teacher and to see the end result of all the years of education.
The Teacher in Space program was always controversial within the teaching community. The Massachusetts Teachers Association, for one, opposed the program, saying the money should be spent instead directly on education. But though it may have started out as something of a publicity stunt, the program eventually became a morale boost for the profession.
It was a chance to commemorate, I think, every teacher, past, present, and future teachers.
When the entire program was announced by President Reagan a couple of years ago, I guess I was skeptical of it. I was not in Massachusetts at that time. I no longer am. Higher education needs that kind of assistance. Education in general needs that kind of uplift, and I think she was giving it to us. I think the country was taking notice.
When there are those who criticize the concept itself, speaking for myself, I think that most of these people are not prophetic enough about the future of education.
Obviously, NASA's going to get some good publicity, and I don't have any problem with that at all. The money that they have expended, though, has raised the level of teaching as far as the role of the teacher. They're going to have a wonderful PR, and that's true. But I also think it's exciting students about a way of life that's part of their future. They've got to get ready for this. Their grandchildren are probably going to be on space stations. There are going to be totally different fields. I mean, there's going to be space law. There's going to be business in space. And students have to prepare for that future, and I think this will help them do that.
Christa McAuliffe's mission was to teach people a lesson we've begun to forget, that the space program is about learning, expanding the frontiers of human knowledge. And she may have achieved that mission despite what happened today. For the 10 o'clock news, I'm Christy George.
You didn't have to know Christa McAuliffe and her family personally, or the other shuttle travelers for that matter, to feel a personal sense of loss today. It came again each time we watched her on videotape exuberantly going through her training exercises for the shuttle trip, or each time we heard again her hopes for the lessons she would learn and teach from space. University of New Hampshire professor Joshua Meyrowitz has studied the phenomenon of instant intimacy with people we may never meet in real life but feel connected to through television. Earlier this evening, we recorded this interview from Durham, New Hampshire. Professor Meyrowitz, I think many of us who heard the news or perhaps saw the explosion live this morning immediately thought about Christa McAuliffe's husband and parents and children who were watching this, and we were horrified for them. And then perhaps later we thought about the other people on board, and yet we all, I think, seem to feel this sense of kinship with Christa McAuliffe. Do you think that's because she is a New Englander, because she was the first civilian to go up, or is there something else going on here?
Well, I think that we've all felt that, and we still feel that now, not only because of her being a New Englander and a civilian, but also because of the power of television to make us feel that we actually met her, and that we know her, and that we met her family. She was the focus of the media attention before the flight, and we feel that we are friends with her, that we somehow have an intimate relationship with her. And I think that intensifies the grief tremendously.
Is there also a sort of psychic numbing that goes on? I remember the first time I saw the tape, it was obviously very horrifying, and it doesn't get any less horrifying, but somehow easier to accept the 15th time you've seen the explosion rather than the first time.
Yes, I think that it is becoming easier as we see it over and over again, as the media dwell on the tragedy and review it for us and try to explain it to us, or at least put it in some type of perspective. And I think that this often happens with tragedies involving people whom we've met through the media, that the media becomes the most ritualized place for the mourning, and that we through the media have retrospectives and commentaries and discussions. We saw this with John Kennedy's assassination. We saw it with Samantha Smith's plane crash, with Ricky Nelson's plane crash, and also with John Lennon and other media friends, as I call them, people whom we've met primarily through the media, who we get to know in ways that we used to only get to know people when we were in the same place with them.
How is it that this is so different, though, from coverage of tragedies in the past, the Titanic, for example?
Well, there were no cameras there at the Titanic, and the Titanic was thought of as an abstract, terrible accident in terms of the loss of life. That phrase, loss of life, is a very abstract term. And here we see it primarily as the loss of a life or a few particular lives. Again, particularly the person whom we felt we've met, and we think about her family and her children. And we think about it in terms of the images that we have had of her, which is that we saw the twinkle in her eye, and we saw the way that she smiled and the way that she giggled. And we think about those types of things. And that's very different from thinking of an abstract phrase, loss of life or great tragedy. It's much more personal. At the same time that media give us, though, that sense of close-up, that sense of intimacy, they do something else that's very strange, and that is they give that sense of intimacy to millions of people at the same time.
And that's very different, too.
Yes, in the Titanic, different people in different parts of the country and the world found out about it at different times. There was a long, long delay before people heard about it. And here, we've gotten it all at once. The shock has come in a massive impact because of that intimacy and because of the simultaneity of it and the sharing of it.
I think most of us who could do so today were pretty much glued to our television screens. It was the story. It remains the story. But is it too much coverage?
I think if you step back and look at it objectively, you'd have to say that this is not the only important thing that's happening in the world, and that the other stories seem to be getting pushed out of the picture. And this happens with many of these events. So I think the reason for that is that when we have a personal grief, when we have a relative or a friend die, we can't think of anything else the whole day. But we go to work, and everybody else there doesn't share that, and so we try to act normal. We try to deal with all the other things that are going on. But when we feel the loss and the grief for someone like Christa, who we've all met through the media, then we go to work, and everybody there has the same grief. go to newsrooms, and all the journalists feel the same things. And so it tends to take over. That subjective feeling becomes a shared subjective feeling, and it tends to take on a sense of objectivity, as if this is the only thing that there is to think or talk about for the whole day.
Thank you, Professor Meyrowitz.
Thank you.
In schoolrooms all over the country today, around lunchtime, teachers read their students bulletins of death and dismay from Cape Kennedy. This shuttle mission was to have been the stuff of lesson plans and career dreams for children and teachers alike. At the Jackson Mann Elementary School in Brighton, we found a sample of Boston fifth graders eager to reach out to Christa McAuliffe's pupils in New Hampshire, quick to make associations with earthly hazards that they know, like drunk driving, and with safety measures like seat belts. Space adventure should and will go on, these kids said, but perhaps without them. Have you ever had dreams of being an astronaut?
Yes. No. No.
Why not, Rose?
I don't know. I'd rather be on Earth.
Because of this accident or not?
No. All my life I've thought I'd want to be on Earth.
Richard, why have you...
I'd like to see what it looks like up in space.
Kong, you've thought of being an astronaut?
No.
Would you?
Nope.
If President Reagan were asking you today, where do we go from here, what would you tell him?
Tell him to watch out for the stuff that is happening and tell the other people who are launching to be careful.
Would you go ahead with the next shuttle flight?
No, I'll wait for a few days and then they can launch it.
Would you cancel the next one or not?
No.
Would you go ahead with the next launch?
I think so. Yep. I would tell him go ahead and just make sure everything's okay before the launch.
Would you go on one of these flights yourself?
No.
Richard?
No.
Kong?
No.
Rose?
No.
Why not?
It's too scary after what happened today.
And what was the worst of it for you?
The exploding. To know that a teacher was on it and a teacher might be lost. I said that I felt very sad for the teacher, for her kids, and I feel very sad for everybody. I feel sorry for her, and I wish she'd come back to teach us, to teach the student.
President Reagan heard the news at the White House as he was preparing to brief a group of reporters on tonight's now postponed State of the Union address. Later this afternoon, the president went on television to mourn the crew of the shuttle as fallen heroes and to offer a special message to the nation's school children.
We've grown used to the idea of space, and perhaps we forget that we've only just begun. We're still pioneers. They, the members of the Challenger crew, were pioneers. And I want to say something to the school children of America who were watching the live coverage of the shuttle's takeoff. I know it's hard to understand, but sometimes painful things like this happen. It's all part of the process of exploration and discovery. It's all part of taking a chance and expanding man's horizons. The future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave. The Challenger crew was pulling us into the future, and we'll continue to follow them.
Dorothy Austin is a psychotherapist who is also a theologian, a teacher of both psychology and religion at the Harvard Medical School. We asked her to reflect with us on an accident that has so quickly become a symbolic event. What are young people, including your students, making of this day, do you think?
Well, Christopher, I think this has been a day in which we've tried desperately to recover and to make sense of this, to find a way to come to terms with the collective grief that we're all feeling as being part of the global village in which we've all been participants in a very intimate way in this event. When I talked to students today throughout the day, I found that they were very eager to talk about it. They wanted to talk about their own grief, and more than that, I think they wanted to raise a lot of issues about what this meant for them, for their lives, for the life of the nation, for our questions and our purposes in relation.
What kinds of issues?
Well, for example, I'll give you one or two examples from the classroom. One student said, You know, this has shaken my confidence in the, well, I guess you could say, in the gods of technology, he said. He said, you know, I've always felt that America is a country of great technological know-how, and indeed we are, he said. But this is an event which has cost lives, and an event that we thought would never happen. And one student quickly added, yes, we have a kind of, in a religious sense, a kind of hubris, a feeling that we can reach forever into the stars, into the heavens, and somehow we'll be immune to our earthly condition.
But does that make President Reagan's statement that, in effect, we plunge on, that there's no turning back, does that add irony to plunging ahead, or do you think people actually ever think of turning back?
It's a good question. I think that that in some sense the sorts of things we've been saying tonight will hold true, that no one wants to feel that these lives have been lost in vain, that they have been lost in some sort of foolhardy attempt to gather more information, to continue to explore. I don't think anyone's suggesting that, and particularly certainly not at this moment of great grief nationally. Whatever else we say, we know that fathers and sons and wives and mothers are not returning to their homes. I think the question of what our relationship is to our technology, however, it comes up again and again, and undoubtedly comes up at this moment. What is the relationship of space exploration to our desires to somehow in space find the answer to the solutions of conflict, security, our desire for security, that will somehow find the answers to the questions of international conflict and our desire for security in outer space. At least the students that I've talked to today raise this with a great deal of sensitivity. What is their participation in it? What do they now think about it?
Can I change the subject a little bit? What are people making of these 7 heroic, wonderful, black, white, male, female, gifted, energetic, enterprising heroes?
Yeah. One student said to me, you know, I'm embarrassed to say this, but I kept thinking all the while, this was a young woman who's preparing to be a teacher, she said, you know, I got very caught up in this, and I wanted very much to be the teacher who went, and I kept thinking maybe one day I would be. She said, and suddenly, when the disaster happened, I said to myself, and I was ashamed of it, but I said to myself, thank God I wasn't on it. And she said, now I think of myself as a survivor, and we're all thinking of ourselves as survivors. And what is the mission of the survivor? And those of us who are alive and surviving, what does this mean for our lives? I think tragedy makes this, and the loss of lives makes this especially a poignant question when we think about what it is we remain on Earth to do. Certainly, students are raising that. But I also think it's part of the great American story, you know. Only in America, to some extent, do paupers become kings and school teachers become astronauts.
Thank you. Dorothy Austin. It has been a long day and evening between heroism and hubris. We have all been charged lately, not just by these shuttle flights, but by the same space program's spectacular visions of Uranus. Yet we are chastened, too, by the prospect of weaponry in space soon. And in that twilight zone, we have all been shaken today, if not shattered, by this very human disaster. It may be well just to note well and to remember how closely touched we all feel. That's our news. I'm Christopher Lydon.
I'm Gail Harris. Good night.
The 10 o'clock news was made possible by grants from Shawmut Banks, providers of education, financing, and information at over 170 offices throughout Massachusetts. By Nimrod Press, printers and engravers. By New England Telephone, serving New England's communications needs for 100 years. And by your contribution.